You think a true frontier hunter was judged by how straight they shot, that hitting the target was the only measure of skill. But the real mark of a master wasn't the kill itself, it was the silence after. One extra shot, one telling sound, and everything changed. The hunter became the hunted. Their very life depended on a single deadly quiet moment. Number 1. Always keep firewood dry. Out on the frontier, a simple rainstorm could be a death sentence. If your firewood got soaked, you had no way to get warm. And in the freezing cold, hypothermia can set in terrifyingly fast. This meant keeping a stockpile wasn't just a good idea, it was a constant, back-breaking chore. You gathered wood whenever you could and you protected it like gold. But staying warm was only half the battle. You also had to eat, which came with its own brutal rules. Number 2. Never travel without a knife. On the frontier, your knife was your lifeline. Forget modern multi-tools. This one simple blade did everything. You'd use it to skin game, prepare food, and even carve other essential tools from wood. If your gear broke, your knife was what you used to fix it. It could help you build a shelter, start a fire with flint, or serve as your last line of defense. Losing it simply wasn't an option, but a sharp blade was useless against an invisible enemy. Number 3. Store food for a failed harvest. That invisible enemy was starvation. On the frontier, you were always just one bad season away from disaster. A single drought, an early frost, or a wave of pests could destroy an entire year's work. There were no grocery stores to fall back on. Every scrap of food had to be preserved. Meat was heavily salted or smoked. Vegetables were pickled, and fruits were dried. A full cellar wasn't for convenience. It was the only thing standing between your family and starving over winter. Number 4. Learn to identify safe wild plants. When the stored food was gone, settlers turned to the land itself. The woods were full of things to eat, if you knew what to look for. Wild greens, roots, and berries could keep a family alive. But this was a dangerous game. For every safe plant, a deadly look-alike was waiting. One wrong choice wasn't just a mistake, it was fatal. And there was no 911 to call. Knowing your plants was as critical as knowing how to aim. Number 5. Conserve ammunition whenever possible. On the frontier, every bullet was precious, and not just because of the cost. It was a rule of raw survival. A single gunshot echoing through the woods is incredibly hard to place. But a second shot acts like a flare, giving away your exact location to anyone who might be hunting you. This forced a strict one-shot, one-kill discipline. It wasn't about being efficient. It was about making sure the hunter didn't suddenly become the hunted. Number 6. Build shelter before nightfall. Out on the frontier, the setting sun wasn't a relief. It was a timer. Once the light began to fade, every other task stopped. Building a shelter was the only thing that mattered, because the cold was a more certain killer than any predator. A simple lean-to could be the difference between waking up and freezing to death in your sleep. It wasn't about comfort, it was purely about seeing the next sunrise. But even a warm shelter couldn't protect you from what was already inside your own body. Number 7. Keep water sources clean. That killer inside your body often came from a single sip of water. A crystal clear stream looked safe but could carry diseases like cholera. On the frontier, there were no filters, no medicine, and no doctors. A sickness from the water could wipe out a family in days. That's why they had an unbreakable rule. Your drinking water was kept completely separate from all waste. One mistake could poison the well for everybody. Poisoned water could kill a community, but a simple cut could kill you just as fast. Number 8. Repair equipment immediately. On the frontier, a broken tool wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a potential death sentence. There were no hardware stores. If your axe handle cracked or a wagon wheel split, you were completely on your own. Waiting to fix it wasn't an option because a small crack could become a total failure when you needed it most, leaving you defenseless or stranded. Settlers had to fix everything themselves immediately. A settler was only as good as their tools, but their most critical tool wasn't made of iron or wood. Number 9. Never waste animal resources. A successful hunt provided far more than a few meals. Wasting anything was unthinkable. After the meat was stored, the work was just beginning. The hide was carefully scraped and tanned to make clothes, shoes, or blankets. The bones were shaped into tools like awls and needles. Even the fat was rendered down for soap and candles, while tough sinew was used as thread. An animal wasn't just food, it was a walking toolkit for survival. But no amount of resourcefulness could protect you from a human threat. Number 10. Know multiple ways to start a fire. For a settler, fire was life, and trusting just one way to make it was a deadly gamble. A pouch of flint and steel was reliable, but what if it got soaked crossing a river? Matches were a luxury, but they could be lost or used up. That's why settlers always had a backup plan. They knew friction fire methods like the bow drill, skills that let them create a life-saving ember from nothing but wood. This wasn't just a skill, it was insurance against freezing. But even the best survival skills couldn't save you if you broke the unwritten social codes. Number 11, plant more than you need. A settler's garden wasn't a hobby, it was a battleground against starvation. They couldn't just plant enough to get by. They had to assume disaster would strike because it often did. A sudden drought could wither the corn, a swarm of insects could devour a field overnight, or a freak hailstorm could flatten everything. Planting extra wasn't greedy, it was the only smart play. That surplus was their insurance policy, ensuring there was still enough food to put away for winter. But a full cellar didn't just protect you from winter, it also made you a target. Number 12. Keep emergency supplies year-round. A cabin fire or a sudden attack could wipe out everything you owned in an instant. That's why a smart settler always had an emergency kit ready. It held the absolute essentials: medical supplies, extra gunpowder and lead, and tools for urgent repairs. This wasn't a backup plan. It was the only plan for when your main supplies were destroyed. It was the one thing you grabbed when you had to run for your life. But even the best supplies couldn't save you from a betrayal. Number 13. Learn basic first aid skills. On the frontier, there was no doctor. A deep cut from an axe or a broken leg could easily become a death sentence. Settlers had to be their own medics, learning how to clean wounds, set a bone with a splint from branches, and use plants to make a poultice to fight infection. Knowing these skills wasn't a bonus, it was the only thing that could stop a simple accident from turning fatal. But sometimes the greatest danger wasn't an accident at all. Number 14. Trust preparation over luck. Settlers knew you couldn't rely on luck. Survival was earned through practice. Take hunting, for example. When you were deep in hostile territory, you were both the hunter and the hunted. The rule was simple: one shot, one kill. Why? Because a single gunshot is hard to place, but a second one instantly gives your position away. That mistake could be fatal. Being a crack shot wasn't about pride, it proved your preparation was enough to keep you alive. All this preparation was for nothing, though, if you failed to follow one last critical piece of advice. Number 15. Work with neighbors during hard times. The image of the lone wolf surviving against all odds is powerful, but on the frontier it was mostly a myth. Your single greatest asset wasn't your rifle or your axe, it was your neighbor. If a sickness swept through your cabin, they were the ones who brought food. If a barn burned down, the whole community showed up to rebuild it in a few days. They understood a simple truth: you might survive a winter alone, but you could only build a future together. These rules weren't just smart choices, they were the thin line between life and death. Every single one, from keeping your firewood dry to helping your neighbors, hammered home a brutal truth. The frontier didn't care about convenience,